G'day mate, welcome to episode 77 of the Exponential Performance Podcast. In this episode, Nick has been back out chasing interviews with different people that we thought might be of interest to you. This week, Nick sits down with Holistic Nutritionist and Wellness Coach Nicola Brown and talks to her about all things nutrition and wellness related. We hope you enjoy it. If you've got any questions for Nicola for a future episode, feel free to send them in and we will get her back on and have a chat to her in depth about some of these topics. But for now, sit back, relax and enjoy.
Welcome to the Exponential Performance Podcast. Join sports scientist and performance coach Maddie Graham to find out how to train smarter and maximize your performance no matter who you are.
Hey guys, welcome to the Exponential Performance Podcast. Today we've got another interview happening with Nicola Brown, and I'll let Nicola introduce herself a little bit, but she is a qualified nutritional coach. She's a personal trainer. She's also got a qualification in primary teaching. But let's hear a little bit about you, Nick, and then we will delve into why we're talking to you on the podcast today.
No, all good. Thanks for having me, by the way, on the podcast. So I'm really looking forward to delving into some good conversations today. So a bit about me. I grew up in Wanganui with my parents and my younger brother, and I finished high school in Wanganui, and I went to Teachers College not far down the road in Palmerston North. I came back to Wanganui and taught for a few years in the primary school setting before heading overseas, and I lived in Ireland in the Republic for nearly 2 years. Came back to New Zealand and moved pretty much straight up to Auckland for around 8 years, and now I've been back in Wanganui for not quite a year and a half. So that's sort of where I've been as such. I guess throughout the years I did a multitude of different jobs and training, such as in Ireland I did everything but teaching, as you do when you're travelling. And then in Auckland my first job was at Les Mills on the shore, and while working and gaining experience there as a gym instructor, I did my personal training certificate at AUT, and then went to complete the Les Mills certificate as well, which is separate. So coming up to a couple of years working in the gym setting, I ended up having shoulder surgery from continuous dislocations, and the road to recovery was quite long, as some of you may know with shoulders. So I decided to step away from the gym scene and get a job working for the Greater Auckland Coaching Unit, and they were based up at AUT Millennium on the North Shore, which then merged into a regional sports trust. And then that job sort of finished, and through my contacts up at AUT Millennium, I was working with a lot of AUT staff anyway, and through the networking with that, I ended up working for the School of Sport and Rec at AUT. So that was my last job before I moved out of Auckland, I guess, as a student coordinator. And while at AET, I decided to start my postgrad cert with Holistic Performance Nutrition. And I had already, I guess, had a lot of contacts through AUT and HPN as well, Holistic Performance Nutrition, so it just was a really good fit into where I was heading and my passions. And fast forward to moving back to Wanganui now, I've started my own business in the last year and a half in nutrition coaching, among other things, and have picked up a new skill as a barista as well. So I've been doing that part-time, a little coffee container in Wanganui while building up my business. So yeah, that's pretty much my story in a nutshell. But nice. Obviously we'll delve more into those bits and pieces.
Yeah, just for a few listeners that may not understand, so AUT is the Auckland University up in Auckland.
Yeah.
Naturally. No, it's
All
okay.
acronyms in sporting industry.
Yes, and in New Zealand, that's where the high performance sport New Zealand sort of is based out of there, aren't they? Really?
Yep, high performance. like I said, the Regional Sports Trust, Millennium as well, all the pools there, the gym, lots of different regional sports organisations. It was just a really good hub, They had a lot of events there, and you'd see from any day Olympic athletes right down to your children that were learning how to swim, So it was a very cool setup, and I think they've got a very good thing going there. So I really enjoyed my time there, and also with working in AUT as well, and around the School of Sport and Rec, and especially with the nutrition guys at AUT as well. So
Yeah, it's a pretty cool facility that we have in New Zealand. It's a shame for those of us in the lower South Island that it's not a little bit more accessible.
That's true.
Certainly from a wider picture, it's a pretty cool facility to have in one spot.
I know they did get a lot of overseas students, especially AUT, and doing placements up at AUT Millennium, and it was world renowned for what they do, especially in the sports labs and stuff. So yeah, you have to get up sometime.
Yes.
Not there now, but
it's something that might be of interest to some of our listeners in New Zealand anyway. They do a range of like performance testing from a physiological point of view, and something I had done probably 3 or 4 years ago now was like a metabolic efficiency test, to kind of to show where I start using carbohydrate over fat from that endurance exercise and a heart rate point of view.
Awesome.
And it's quite an interesting test. It'd be much more applicable if I had a way to retest it without having to go to Auckland. And I think they are doing some of that in Dunedin now too, but maybe at some point I'll have to track down, I think it was Adrian Romanos at the stage that was doing it. He might still be there. See if he wants to come and give us a bit of a spiel on what that's all about.
And I think they did actually get quite a few, like I said, Olympic athletes, but then general pop going in and testing VO2 max and all that kind of stuff, or skin fold measures and, just other things around the sporting industry. So it was a really cool place to be.
Yeah, it would have been actually. It would have set you up really well when you crossed over to start learning under Cliff at HPN. And again, listeners that have been with us for a while, Cliff Harvey, who's the founder of the Holistic Performance Institute, was on a podcast quite some time ago. We did a wee interview with him around one of his books. But he's
Is it the carb appropriate one?
It was,
yeah. Yep.
Yeah, it was his first one there. And he's just such a wealth of knowledge. And I've certainly thoroughly enjoyed studying with him over the past. And it's really cool to kind of keep in touch and be talking to people like yourself who have studied under him, because he's got such a great grounding in that bigger holistical picture, really.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, the other ones up at AUT, Grant and Karen and, Mickey Williden as well, they're all really good contacts and people in New Zealand that are really well regarded in the nutrition area. So, I was very fortunate to be surrounded by or have known, those people.
Yeah, absolutely. And since you've headed back down to the Wanganui region, you have, like you said, you started up your own business. What's that called so people can have a wee look?
So I'm training in the, I guess, Nicola Brown Wellness Coach. And as I've said, that derives from not only my recent studies around nutrition, but obviously I can give advice around, personal training and fitness and movement, and around mental health and well-being as well. So a real holistic approach. I didn't really want to box myself and this is all that I do as such.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of, I guess, encompasses that whole holistic approach from a nutrition, exercise, mental health kind of point of view, doesn't it, really?
Yeah, definitely. Like I'm a big believer in, your body all connecting with one another, and if one's off, then we need to sort of look at that area before something else can, go well, your mind or your gut or, your gut health or your body, it all definitely links. And you can tell when something is off, and I think that's, a real driver of what I do in my business. Yeah,
absolutely. And so what kind of clientele would you see on a weekly or a fortnightly basis within that?
So anywhere from general population, people just wanting to improve their habits and routines, weight loss, and then I guess on the other end of the spectrum, working with athletes, anywhere from triathletes to powerlifters, and most recently, and ones that I've worked with the most is in the rugby area. So it can be like AUT Millennium. My job can also be quite varied, from one end of the spectrum to the other who I work with. So it's quite varied, and no client is the same.
No.
So yeah,
no,
it's
I think
interesting.
that's a big part of that sort of nutritional area is it's so varied. I guess Maddie and myself coaching predominantly endurance sports. There's obviously the sport and discipline change, but the principles are pretty similar. If we started coaching powerlifting athletes and, sprint track runners and then all of a sudden back to endurance, it would be certainly interchangeable. But it's really cool to get that spectrum, but it definitely does make it a wee bit harder in terms of trying to build some guidelines and some recommendations for different populations.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, if this year all went to plan, I would be, going into my second year with working, involved with rugby, and I guess you build up that credibility and networking and stuff. So fingers crossed we get back on track soon, and that's sort of the area I guess I've been heading as such. But don't get me wrong, I love working with, general population, people just wanting to improve their health, their daily lives. So,
It's certainly become, the general population, and, we can lump some sort of weekend warrior type athletes into there as well.
Yeah.
The whole health and wellness craze has certainly become a lot more popular in the last couple of years. And I suspect sort of post-COVID-19 in New Zealand at least, that's going to continue. There's going to be a lot more people looking for, how do I keep my health high, especially through winter with nutrition and some basic supplementation if need be.
Yeah. Well, I always think, around you can only control the controllables, right? And one thing that I believe is, control the controllables. What you can control is what you consume and what you put in your body. You might not be able to, control what happens to your job or what happens in the world right now, or, sickness in your family or anything like that. But what you can control is what you consume, if that makes sense, which makes, has a huge impact on your health and well-being at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And I love that we control the controllables because it is such a scary thing not knowing and not being able to control a situation. And I guess that's what we've faced all around the world recently with COVID-19, and not being able to control how long we're in lockdown for, or how we're going to get food, or are we going to get going to the supermarket or something like that. But we can control, what we put into our bodies, and we can control getting out of the house and getting some sunlight and walking around the block and so forth. So I think that ties really nicely into, one of the main reasons that we're talking to you today, and around that connection between nutrition and mental health. And I know it's an area that you're quite passionate about. So it'd be really cool to kind of get your view on nutrition and mental health and how they interconnect. And I guess how nutrition has a massive impact on our mental health.
Yeah. I guess a lot comes from my own experience and why I'm so passionate about it. I will put it out there. I have suffered from mental health myself in the form of depression and anxiety. And I guess that's why I'm so passionate about it now, right? Because I'm at probably the best stage of my life in terms of how I feel and how I am. So a big driver of why I got into this area was I noticed what worked for me was changing my lifestyle, changing my habits and routines, consuming, nutrient-dense foods, moving my body the way it can, and being kind to myself, sleep, all these holistic things, moved through my life and the challenges that I faced. And I can now say that, like I said, I'm at the best stage of my life because of those, changes, those consistent habits and routines that I put into my life.
Yeah.
I could delve deeper into that, but
Well, I might save that for another episode.
Yeah, no, that's right.
But no, that's like you say. I mean, it's learning firsthand, I guess, with ourselves is a big powerful thing. And kind of what you're describing there, changing more to a nutrient dense sort of diet, movement, and sleep and so forth is really getting back to those grounding sort of basic primal kind of patterns, isn't it? Really, we're born to move, we're born to eat nutrient foods when we can find them, and we're born to sleep when it gets dark outside.
Yeah. And we are what we eat. I'm sure everyone can agree, if you've had a binge night, drinking loads of alcohol, all you crave is all that, fatty food to soak up the alcohol. The next day you just feel blah, that whole feeling. Or if you've eaten something and you just don't feel right, I'm a big believer in what we consume, energizes us or, is the right type of fuel for us to get us through the day. And it has a huge, part to play on how our mind is. And our gut, like I said before, in terms of what healed me and what I know has healed other people is around that whole brain-gut connection. So what's happening on the inside projects what happens on the outside, right? Obviously it's a lot more complex than that at times, but if we can get back to the basics of eating good nutrient-dense foods, whole, natural, unprocessed, where possible, getting good vitamin D out in the sun, getting good, consistent sleep patterns is huge. I think that would actually be number one. Hydration, so as basic as, drinking water. And then the other thing would be surrounding yourself with, good people, good supportive people in your life. So it's a whole, circle around someone, isn't it,
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. You've mentioned it a couple of times, so maybe the nutrient-dense food. When you say nutrient-dense food, what do you, from a, I don't know, we look at it maybe from like a breakfast, lunch, dinner kind of rough spectrum, what would that look like?
I don't like to, I guess this is probably going into the whole area of diet culture maybe, but I don't like to put food as like label it as good or bad. Do you know what I mean? I like to, looking at a food, how nutrient dense is it in terms of it's fueling for the body. So you put, I'm just going to put it out there, KFC, McDonald's, takeaway foods, but then you get, say, a one ingredient food. So this is where I'm heading. So foods that have got maybe one ingredient, so a kumara or a chicken breast or spinach or almonds, that's one ingredient foods. And then on the other end of the spectrum is what I just said before, and then whatever happens in between. But I like to say, my daily diet, or recommend throughout the day, that you base your meals around those one ingredient foods, and then you build it up from there as such.
Yep, and that's a really simple way to look at it for people, isn't it?
Yeah. And I have found that it has worked for clients and myself, clients, athletes, other people. So it's almost flipping that. Unfortunately, the food pyramid that's still in the government guidelines, it's almost flipping that on its head and having the base of the pyramid, with all those beautiful colours, your vegetables, especially above ground vegetables. Then on top of there, you're adding your good sources of protein and your good sources of fats, because fat is good for us, Nick?
It is.
and they're, like adding in your fruits. So these are all one ingredient foods, right? And then, we can sort of build the pyramid from there. Whole grains, those sources of carbohydrates are good as well. So that's what the day would look like. Moving on from that, I'm a big believer in eating to satiety. So I do also feel that if you're eating the right type of foods, you should feel satisfied. If you're looking at your plate and you finish that meal, you should feel satisfied. Do you know what I mean? You shouldn't half an hour later be wanting to go to the fridge or the pantry or something else. Either you haven't fueled yourself properly to satiety, or there's other issues going on, like you're bored or you're distracted or something else like that. You should be able to eat 2 to 3 meals consistently a day and feel satisfied.
Yeah, and a big thing from my spectrum, and the podcast listeners have heard me blare on about it a couple of times with satiety, especially with protein.
Definitely.
And it's, again, especially in that athlete population where people are, they're using their muscles and they're very active and they're breaking stuff down, they need to repair. And that obviously comes from the protein, and tend to find a lot of people that are struggling with satiety or being full from a meal aren't getting enough protein in said meal. And I know you mentioned chicken breast and so forth in there, and just sort of the education around, I guess, protein levels and foods for people. People think protein, they think a protein shake or some sort of powder that they have to consume to get a protein intake. And so it's quite cool about to use foods and I guess explain to people and show people what is possible just from eating food without going down a supplementation pathway.
Oh, definitely. And, there is a World Health Organization daily minimum, which I think is 0.8, but I may have heard or seen somewhere that they're thinking of increasing that per kg of body weight per day. I'm not sure if you've said that to your listeners before, but there is that daily minimum. But in terms of who I work with, I would be encouraging people to have quite a bit more than that. And people think in terms of protein, they think, I'll get big and they just think straight away bodybuilding, right? But it is actually really hard to overconsume protein. I mean, you try and sit down and have, 2+ grams of kg of, body weight per day of protein. It's quite hard to consume that amount in one go. It's one of those. So you're probably not having as much as you think, you should be having. So, yeah.
Yep. And I'm a big supporter of the fact that, I think a lot of people don't consume enough, and or they think they're consuming enough, but when they put it on paper, it's like, oh, actually, that's not enough. Or they're adhering to that World Health Organization kind of value of about 0.8, but they're, a physical athlete, runners, especially obviously in your domain with rugby players, they're needing 1.4, 1.6, 2 grams of protein a day.
Yep.
And like I said, if you try and eat that in real food, it's pretty hard. So it's a good challenge, I think, to set when people are looking at sort of a dietary approach to use that as their base point. Okay, we're getting enough. Sorry.
No, you got. I mean, to a lot of the listeners and people, like especially in general pop, talking about numbers and stuff, it's quite hard to imagine sometimes. But I like to, get our hands out and actually look at our hands as guidance around what we should be eating on our plates. So obviously with males, if you're looking at your 2 palms circumference and thickness of protein, that's a good guidance. And obviously the bigger you are, the bigger your hands are going to be, right? So just rather than trying to think, what is that grams and trying to work it all out, I know there's apps and stuff out there like MyFitnessPal and Easy Diet Diary and those sort of ones. But if we can just look at our plate that we've got in front of us and being like, I know that's going to keep me satisfied. Do you know what I mean? Yep. So really tuning into what your body has given you to give you clues and how much you need to be eating on your plate.
Yep. And that's a good guide too, especially if people are, no one really likes to weigh food, let's be honest.
No.
And if you can have some sort of rough measure. No, that's right. And it's quite funny, it's often nutritional coaches and dietitians and so forth that are asking people to weigh food, but them themselves don't like weighing the food at the other end anyway. And I'm still a big believer in that, you can't get it that accurate anyway from you don't need to weigh down to the nearest gram for your calories each day. So, so that's cool. So we kind of have strayed a little bit away from that, but it's really, I quite like that conversation around nutrient-dense food and just highlighting to people, that one ingredient, so to speak.
So you can kind of look at that in terms of going to the supermarket, right? Like whereabouts are you going to shop? Most of the one ingredient nutrient dense foods hopefully a lot of your listeners know, is around the outside of the supermarket, and then every so often you'll go into the middle of the aisles to get, like your eggs or your oils or spices and herbs and that kind of stuff, So it really goes into your life and how you shop and how you prepare and everything as well. So yeah, that's why I'm a big believer in it.
I think too, foods like, you mentioned KFC, and I know on the internet.
I can't wait till it opens on Tuesday. No, just joking.
Yes, but I guess there's a lot of recipes too floating around online over the lockdown period of how to make your own KFC at home.
Yeah.
So I guess in your perception, is that a better option to make your own?
It can be, if you're not using, like oils that are, highly inflammatory, in the body, your polyunsaturated trans fats and all that kind of stuff. So yes, it can be a better option. And I'm all about getting people back into the home and the kitchen and cooking with their families and their kids, sitting down for meals and being proud of what you can produce yourself. And I'm sure there's a lot of people in this time that have actually surprised themselves and be like, hey, look, I can actually cook food, It's not actually that hard, as long as I'm a little bit more prepared. I've got all the ingredients, and it's amazing what you can come up with, whether that be KFC chicken at home or, or pizzas, or, you can cook good quality food at home without having to go to takeaways.
Yeah, no, and I think that's...
Hopefully I don't offend any people saying that, but it just you can see what my beliefs are.
Yeah, and I think that's the key point, like you said, that homemade KFC can still be bad for us if we choose the wrong ingredients to add in there. And it's not just the fact that KFC, when we go to the shop to buy it, comes from a big takeaway chain, but it's the ingredients they're using within that process that are the bad component, or so to speak. Not that we want to put the word bad in there, but the nasty component to it.
Yeah.
So, moving to the next point, you've talked a little bit about gut health and how that's played a big role for yourself, but also for a lot of your clients. What is it? Obviously the gut has a really nice link with the brain, and it's helping us with a lot of signals, and a lot of our mood comes from the gut and the brain connection there. Maybe we could go through a few key kind of nutrients for the gut, and how we can get them in through foods.
Yeah, definitely. So obviously you want to get some sour foods in there, so you're thinking of, your yogurts and your sauerkraut and your kimchi, and your probiotics, kombucha, kefir, all those type of foods you can add in to your daily diet as well. Making sure that you're not having a high sugar diet, because obviously that plays a part in your gut health. Candida overgrowth. So, I've had that myself before in terms of candida. I've had clients that have had it before as well. And that can play a huge role in actually how they mentally feel. There is a huge connection there. So trying to heal the gut is a big thing. Having things like bone broth is good as well for the gut. And then just going back to those one ingredient foods as well. Obviously drinking a lot of water, getting good amount of fibre in your diets. That's coming predominantly from vegetables and fruits. And then I do ask my clients a lot about bowel health. So yes, we talk about like poos as well, and what it's like, because that is a really, whether they're constipated or whether they have diarrhea, how regular they are, because that actually tells us a lot around how their gut is working, right? So we do have those interesting but much needed conversations in practice. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's when you're not able to physically test everything that comes out of somebody, just a general conversation around the regularity and what it looks like and colour and that kind of stuff can tell us a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Right, cool. So those sour foods you mentioned, they all sounded to me like fermented foods. Is that correct?
Yep. Yep.
Yep.
Yep. So definitely getting fermented foods into your diet daily. You know, you can add them to your salads or, I take and recommend a probiotic drink, daily, something like that. I take one called Vita Biosa. It's a really good one. And I actually think Cliff has it on his website, Nutrition Store Online. It's a little plug for him there. Or Vital Health Company. So, yeah, that's a really good one. That's about a 20 to 30 ml shot a day. Just something as simple as that can add to your gut health.
Yeah, cool. And so they're all about putting good bacteria back into the gut, aren't they, really?
Yeah.
And the bacteria is going to help us signal to the body to do a whole bunch of different things. And probably, I mean, it's quite timely, I guess, with COVID-19, but a big part of what our gut bacteria is helping with is the immune system.
Yeah, definitely.
Again, some of the listeners are probably familiar with the term that 70% of your immune system resides in our gut. So if we can have a much better gut health from fermented foods and probiotic drinks and less sugars and so forth, then we're going to have a much stronger immune system.
I mean, play around with the amounts as well, because I know that some people, like you're thinking of kefir and kombucha, there's actually some people can handle only certain amounts. I know at the supermarkets there's been this big drive with kombucha, which is awesome. It's a good alternative to have than, say, something else that's not so good, but just because it's the bottle there doesn't mean that you have to drink the whole bottle in one go. Do you know what I mean? So just play around with how much you can actually tolerate and how your body reacts to those type of drinks as such.
Yep, and that's a good point, because as far as I'm aware, there's no known side effects of probiotics, but there are some of these effects where people can have increased flatulence and increased in bowel movements when they start off by dumping a whole bunch of good bacteria into the system. They kind of end up fighting the bad, and that just upsets the system. But there's no clinical known side effects of a probiotic.
No.
And they are safe for all populations, people that are pregnant, people that are on sort of certain medications as well. So that's cool. So in terms of, I guess we've got our gut health on check. We're eating single ingredient foods or combining them to make a meal. When we start to kind of, I guess, look at the negative impacts of mental health and being people that are sort of either in some sort of low mood or a depression sort of spectrum, what would be some easy wins for them of going to the supermarket to buy a whole bunch of raw food to cook into a meal is just too much to handle?
I think there's some really good ready-made meals and ones that can be delivered these days as well that are out there without naming any, but there's definitely, look online in terms of getting things delivered to your door. So because whether we're feeling down or if we're feeling on top of our game, one of the best things to feel is if we're prepared for the week, right? And if we are feeling down and depressed and not feeling like getting in the kitchen and cooking nutrient-dense foods, one of the best ways you can do that is have something delivered to you, and it turns up at your door. You've got your week sorted, and then you've got your dinner's done. Do you know what I mean? And hopefully some leftovers for lunch, because the best lunches you can have are usually from leftovers the night before. And I'm a big believer in terms of we've got, say we eat 3 meals a day, and that's 7 days. So we've got 21 meals. If we can just concentrate on small steps at a time and, do one meal, 1 out of the 21. Am I right? No, hold on. 3 sevens. Yeah.
Yeah. No, you're right.
Yeah. Had to go back to my maths then. So if we can just do one meal, not feel like we have to do every single meal that has to be perfect and look Instagram so worthy, and then just build from there, get those little wins in terms of making us feel good and be like, oh, I started my day with, a good amount of protein. That got me to lunchtime. I felt really good. I felt energized. I didn't get a slump about mid-morning, and I felt like doing it for the rest of the day. So it's taking these little small wins, being prepared at the start of the week, getting help, like those things being delivered. That's a really good, easy way to start, and then just chipping away through the week and building on top of that, because it's what we do consistently and continuously that helps, not trying to overwhelm ourselves that we have to do everything, or we should be doing this because we've seen it somewhere or it's working for someone else. Yeah.
Yep. And that's a really good, easy step again too, just change one thing at a time. We're probably fortunate that a lot of the listeners being in the endurance sporting realm, they're kind of quite dedicated to the cause most of the time.
I can imagine.
Especially with training. But dietary changes and dietary approaches tend to come second fiddle to training. People think, right, I can just train some more and I'll lose that extra bit of weight. Or I'm too tired, I've spent doing too much training, I'll back off for a day and I'm good. And we don't tend to address the underlying dietary side of things that often. Or you see a lot of, events sponsored by alcohol companies, or you finish a race and here's a couple of beers, and or, you go for a nice training session and here's a couple more beers and so forth. So we think we do enough training, but we don't address that pillar of nutrition. And therefore,
do you think it still gets pushed aside in the endurance area? Nutrition? Do you think it's on point or going that way, or?
Probably gets pushed aside less than some sports, just because for the longer endurance races, sort of the marathon, Ironman type of distances, you can't ignore it, really. And, you might be able to get away with ignoring it for half your build-up, and then you have to start training, adding nutrition into your training sessions and during the race and so forth. But the last couple of episodes of the podcast, actually, we've been looking at sort of fasted training sessions and the effects that can have on the gut if you don't train the gut to actually eat food when you're training. And I think if people could nail, a percentage of those 21 meals a week, then the training nutrition becomes a little less important, because they're getting the quality nutrients in each meal. So they're more likely to be fueled and recovering better post sessions.
When you're on point, right, with your nutrition, when you've had a good day or a good week nutrition wise, nutrition speaking, when you're feeling on point, like on top of your game, right? And those weeks or those training sessions when you start to really look into, self-awareness in terms of how food makes you feel, when you haven't quite nailed it. And I'm sure that's huge for endurance, athletes, because they may have gone for that run and they may have hit that wall and think like, oh, was I fasted, or, or did I have something to eat that I hadn't trained with beforehand, or I don't know, just, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's very, very, very true. Especially when we start looking at sort of pre-training snacks and during training and post-training meals. But we might leave some of those more finer details to another podcast, because I can see these episodes blown out a little bit with the amount of areas we could dive down. But in terms of what you see with some of your clients and around sport and sport nutrition, and the mental issues or the mental health issues that come from performance-driven sports or aesthetic-driven sports, where there's this drive to, I've got to cut some calories out because I've got to lose some weight, and I've got to do that by 3 weeks down the track or something like that. Do you have some easy advice for people that are maybe thinking, oh, I'm too big, got too much body fat, or not the right body shape for my sport?
Yeah, I guess I have these discussions with the rugby guys, because that's what I can relate to quite a lot, rugby guys and girls as such, and there's a difference in that as well. There's actually a New Zealand recommendation around what position they should be, the positions, and then what their weight and also their skin fold measures should be. Okay. So they know where they need to go and where NZRU are looking, for those particular players. And that's huge stress.
Yeah.
And puts huge stress and worry and anxiety on a lot of these players, because I personally feel we're boxing them, and I always go back to, well, are you performing well on game day, whether this be endurance or rugby or whatever? Are you hitting your PBs in the gym? Are you, or your PBs out on the road or the bike, or how are you feeling? How are you sleeping? It's so much more than just saying you need to be this weight on the scales, yep. Or this skin fold, measures. Where was I going with that? I don't know. I just feel quite passionate about everyone's an individual, and if you're performing at your best, why should you have to be 60 kgs? Where did that come from? Why do you have to be 80 millimeters, in your total skin fold measures? Who actually says that? And I've seen it. It does put a lot of stress and anxiety on them, to the point where they may think, I get questions around, oh, so I'm not allowed to eat that amount of, especially carbohydrates. So I'm not allowed to eat that carbohydrates or this type of fat, or that's going to push it over, and it's quite alarming, really, when you start to look into it from, I guess, a mental health point of view, the stress and anxiety that can put on people. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there'd be quite a few listeners, again, in our area of endurance sport, that would struggle to comprehend that a rugby player would have these same sort of issues.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously everyone's striving to be at their peak performance, but you see rugby players, they're big, strong kind of guys and gals, but you don't think about them having the issue of not being able to eat what they want to eat because of what they're outputting and the muscle that they've got. But I think too, in the endurance space, we see a lot of people on Instagram and Facebook too, and everyone's looking lean and looking fit and mean. But that might be for, their A race of the season, and they've got themselves to that point, and then the next week they'll put on another couple of kgs because they've gone down so low, and that's not a great place for them to hang out and so forth. And I think there's a really sort of fine line between getting the right weight for yourself and then the weight that the sport is for some reason dictating that people be.
And I think if you're under a coach, a good coach will understand you as an individual, and your, the periodization of your training program and the periodization of, your nutrient needs as well, leading up to like you say, your A, what did you call it? Your A race. So they need to have an understanding of, you're going to go through peaks and troughs with your nutrition and stuff until you hit that main race or that main game day. So I think it's really important that as an athlete, you surround yourself with good coaches who have a good understanding of who you are and, what your needs actually are as well. And then that changes from a male and female perspective as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, again, this conversation could become a multiple hour conversation, but one probably area to address, I guess, would be the stress, like you're saying, of having to monitor a macro intake, or I can't have that many carbohydrates, or I have to have this much protein. And the impact of that stress on our body is worse than going to eat something that we potentially shouldn't be eating, with KFC, let's say. If we can reduce the stress on our system by taking the foot off our own throat, so to speak, then we're going to reduce our stress hormones, and we're going to have a better sort of processing of the food, because our gut's going to be healthier, and the flow-on effect is massive.
Oh, hugely. Yeah, I think we need to be a bit kinder to ourselves, and not always think of that number on the scales, and go back to really tuning into you as a person and knowing when you're on point, when you're on top of your game, and, relating back to when did I feel my best, in that race or on that game day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess just even giving the appreciation that eating disorders, and I don't really like the word disorders, but it's the name that is given to it, there's a spectrum on there, and you've obviously got one far extreme from a sort of a medical, clinical point of view, all the way up to the other end where a lot of athletes, I think, fall into this spectrum of not eating enough, or they'll, okay, I'm going to have go low carb, high fat, and then no, I'm got to go back to high carbohydrate, I've got to have gels, and I've got to have, and it becomes a bit of a disorder in itself.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think social media has a huge part to play in that as well. So, making sure, going back to, you're surrounding yourself not with just good coaches and people around you, but what you're looking at on a daily basis as well. And social media. I think that's huge. And that plays a big part in terms of pressures on, eating disorders and what we should look like, or what we need to look like to be able to perform at our best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And social media's got a huge role to play in mental health across a whole range of different things, doesn't it? But certainly in that nutrition space where people tend to only put up the best version of themselves with the right light shining off them, maybe a little bit of water dripped on the skin to make it look shiny, and all these things that are very unrealistic.
Yeah, definitely. So just be careful in terms of, I guess that's a tip, right? If something's making you feel uncomfortable, whether it be the 5 people that surround you the most, or what you're looking at on your phone daily, just be really mindful of, does that make me feel uncomfortable? Does that put me in a position to feel stressed and anxious, and not where I need to be with my sport, and just maybe unfollowing them, or, choosing wisely, I guess.
Yeah.
It needs to work for you and the individual. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's controlling that controllable, isn't it? We can control what we look at.
Correct.
But we can't control what, so-and-so puts on social media. So we just don't follow so-and-so if we don't want to see it. But we're so addicted to following, the hot and sexy, glamorous people, because that's apparently what life's supposed to look like.
Yeah, it's what sells, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
And it's the same with food sometimes too. All these flash meals that get put up, and they're taken photos of very, very craftfully, and then the average Joe like myself goes and try and cooks it. I'm like, it doesn't quite look the same, but it still tastes good. But there's this, it doesn't look like it should look like, but that shouldn't matter.
Yeah, like athletes, especially endurance athletes, seeing, different gels popping up, or electrolytes and stuff, and then be like, oh, that'll work for me. And then come, race day, they might try it for the first time, and it's probably the worst thing that you could ever do, Yep. So just be mindful and careful of what you're choosing and buying online, I guess. And, that, and then trialing it before you go out into race day.
Yes. That's a fantastic tip that probably can't be repeated enough, because we're all guilty of it at times in our life.
Oh, yeah. I've had some shocking experiences with that, but you definitely learn from it, don't you?
You do. Yep. Absolutely. Yep. And it's, again, that's another topic in itself, but in terms of preparing for a race physically, and including within that the nutritional component of it, making sure you've got your meal the night before, the meal 2 days before needs to be on point, because you can't expect just to eat healthy on one day and expect that that's going to increase your performance. So if you can implement these small changes that we've been talking about, 6 months out, then come race day, you're not only going to be mentally in a better space, but physically you'll be in a better space as well.
Yeah. Oh, I go on like that to the rugby athletes all the time. It's not just what you do on game day. It does actually have a flow-on effect from straight after the game. What are you going to fuel yourself for recovery, and then how is that going to go into your Sunday and your Monday, and then preparing for the rest of the week. I say to them, you can't just expect to wake up on Saturday and think it's going to be, right, this is, the day I'm going to change everything and try everything new. It's completely the opposite, to what they're doing.
Yeah, and I imagine that probably with some of the younger rugby players that you work with, that's the harder message to get across, that they can't just front up on game day, because they probably have been through their high school careers fronting up on a Saturday, right, we're bigger and we're stronger than the average player at that level. and we're going to walk all over them. But now we're playing with people that are very much the same as us. Those extra little bits of, the week leading into it is a much more vital piece to the puzzle.
Yeah, and it's been quite cool. Some of the athletes that I've worked with last year to working with them now and seeing them within 6 months to a year's time, their bodies have developed incredibly, and they're still growing, some of these guys. But to see what I've taught them, 6 months to a year ago to now is awesome. Like their body compositions are, most of them are really on target, and they're heading towards hopefully some good careers. Because they're putting all those things into play. They're consistently doing it. They know how they feel. They know it works for them. So I'm really proud of some of them.
Yeah, cool. And that's as a coach, that's a really cool situation to feel, isn't it? When you've watched someone come through such a long period of time, and even you might not still be working with them, but they're still applying these principles you've taught to them at some point, and they're succeeding because of that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, they're more educated, right? And that's a huge part, like I said at the start, from my teaching career, why education is so important to me as well. If we as coaches can just educate someone, whether it's one thing, drink more water, and they implement that for the rest of their lives, I think we've done our job. Yeah,
absolutely. It's been, Maddie posed a statement recently on the podcast that he consistently, I'm pretty sure I've said that right.
I like that. Yep.
Yeah. We were talking about that in a training setting, but it's the same with nutrition, or water. If you can be more consistent drinking water consistently, then you're going to be better off than you were before. And it's just about making these little, 0.5% or 1% changes every week or once a day or whatever it is to make yourself a better human, but also a better athlete in your chosen area.
Just be patient, and it's not all going to come at once, but it will happen. Like I said, I've seen, athletes over a certain period of time, and it does click one day, and it happens. And it's all because you've built up that journey from the get-go, and you've just been so, determined to get there as well. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Now, I think we might come to a close there, just because we're from a time point of view. But there are so many other things that I'd like to talk to you at some point if you'd be happy to come back.
Definitely. Have loved chatting to you so far, Nick. So, and I know we could go down some rabbit holes of all different sorts of topics that I'm very passionate about, and I'm happy to delve deeper into them. So that would be great.
Awesome. Okay. So for now, how do people touch base with you if they want to in the interim? How do we find you?
Yeah, well, I guess I do most of my work on Instagram. That seems to be the easiest way. So nicolabrown.wellness, or over on Facebook in the same tagline. And then otherwise I have an email, nicolabrown.wellness@gmail.com. So get in contact and get some conversations going.
Yeah. I mean, now for athletes in New Zealand, especially with the season, we've just had 4 weeks of lockdown through COVID-19. We have another 2 weeks coming up of relatively lockdown, and then we're into winter. So it's a great time to get on top of nutrition, get your health up via nutrition. And so come summertime next year, when races start popping up, you're in a position where you can actually put in some good training performance because you've got your nutrition sorted. There's no point in waiting till summertime to sort it out.
No. If anything in this time of lockdown and isolation, if it's one thing I hope people would have worked on and continue to work on, is their nutrition. Those control what you consume. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, it's a fantastic. But thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
And look forward to catching up again soon.
Sounds good.
Mate, thanks for listening. If you would like to support this podcast and see it continue into the future, you can do so in a number of ways. Firstly, make sure you subscribe to this channel on whatever platform you are listening. Like and share the podcast on social media to help spread the word. If you're feeling really generous, head over and leave a review and a rating over on iTunes. This helps spread the word and develop the podcast. All of this will help the podcast continue long into the future so we can keep bringing you the information you need to train hard, but most importantly, train smart.